Hey, what's up, you guys? This is Quinlan with Oxygen Beats. It's good to see you guys back this month in the VIP kits. Last month, I did a tutorial on noise sweeps, and so this month I thought I would follow up with a tutorial on risers and falls. We're going to be using Massive again, but once again, I want to iterate that all the concepts that we go over in this tutorial you can really apply to virtually all the synths out there on the market. And really, risers and falls are actually not that complicated of a sound. If you hear a transition that sounds really complicated, it's probably because it's combining a whole bunch of different elements, such as a riser or a fall, with something like a noise sweep, which we went over last month. It could also be combining like a reverse crash, reverse reverb on vocals, or maybe, I don't know, drum roll or something. But as far as the actual riser and fall sound itself, it's really not too complicated. So let's get into it. So we're going to make a few types of sounds today, and the first one is going to be a riser, and we're going to do basically the stereotypical trap rise sounds. And you can drag in audio or whatever, but like I said in the last video, sometimes it's easier to, instead of finding exactly what you need, it's easier just to make it, and then you can kind of customize it for your beat a little bit better, instead of having to rely on just whatever few files you may have for rises. In Massive, we're going to open new sounds, and we're going to turn on all three oscillators. We are going to pitch oscillator number 2 up by 7 semitones, and oscillator 3 is going to go up by 12. This is a perfect fifth, and this is an octave for those of you who are unaware. So here's what it sounds like right now. Okay, so the next step we're going to do is we're going to adjust the levels a little bit. This oscillator 2, we're going to turn it down slightly. Oscillator 3, we're going to turn it down significantly. And really what we're doing here is making our oscillator 1 stand out as the fundamental. Okay, the next step is to route an envelope to our pitch. And for now, we'll try pitching it down basically as far as it goes, which is 64 semitones. And let's hear how that sounds. It's really low right now, so what you can do is you can pitch these oscillators up relatively to compensate, or you can just play higher on your keyboard. Okay, so we're going to now go into our envelope, and we're going to drag this all the way down so it goes up higher. All right, and we're going to drag this down, give it a softer of a increase. And we're going to increase the decay length. All right, I'm going to show you my, let's see, get the channel settings over here, because I think it's important that you see the frequencies. We're starting to get that trap rise sound, and really the key to getting that is you want your frequencies to start around 500 to somewhere around 1 kilohertz. If you have anything less or more, it completely changes the sound. You can hear that sounds pretty good. All right, so it's almost done. The next thing we're going to do is just give it a little bit of space so we can add some reverb to it. Already that really sounding complete, but you can add like delay also, or you can replace a reverb with delay. Let's hear what that sounds like. So with the reverb and the delay, sounds really encompassing, sounds a lot more epic. You can adjust these levels as you see fit. Also, it's really worth experimenting, routing an LFO to the pitch. And you might route this maybe an octave on each oscillator, route it equally. And so you might get something that sounds like this. So when you get the rate going higher, it sounds really interesting, and you can make it less, you can make it more subtle. And you can automate this. What makes it really more interesting, though, is instead of selecting a sine wave for this LFO, you can select a square wave, and it'll sound something like this. Of course, you can change these parameters. Change these parameters to how you see fit, but it gives it a little bit of a sparkle. And that's the bulk of the sounds. You can take a step further. A lot of the risers have a gating effect. You can route a LFO to your volume, or you can route it to the individual volume for each oscillator. And let's hear what that sounds like. Let's drag this up. We increase the rate. Or you can change this instead of a sine to a square. And you can also, just to make it even more engulfing, you can also route an LFO to the panning. So let's hear what that sounds like. Well, obviously, you can experiment around, you can automate these, but this is pretty much the whole sounds, and as you can hear, it sounds really trappy. You can mess around with your envelope settings, change stuff around a bit. Like I said, the key thing really is getting it to start around the 500 hertz to somewhere around 1 kilohertz, and then it will usually go up an octave, which means if it starts at 500, usually it'll rise up to about 1 kilohertz. If it starts at 1 kilohertz, usually it'll rise up maybe to 2 kilohertz, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're using it in a trap beat, you're probably going to have like bass and kick and other elements, maybe like toms or something, bongos, I don't know, whatever bassy elements you might have will be probably playing during the rise. So you don't really want anything down here. So if you do have anything down here, just make sure that you cut it, because you don't want any of that interfering with the rest of the track. So yeah, that's it for the stereotypical trap rise. Let's move on to the next sound. Okay, so now we're going to do like a stereotypical trap fall sound, which is essentially just the same thing as the riser, just inverted. So instead of the pitch going up, it goes down. So yeah, I mean, we got like our saw wave, and we're going to route it up. And we are going to route this to our other oscillators as well. Turn them on. Route this up 7 semitone. And this one up 12. And of course, you can add in the panning, the reverb, the delay, all the extra little goodies. But that is essentially the sound. Again, remember to cut the extra low ends out on this sound. Okay, so let's go into the next sound. Okay, so now we're going to go over like an EDM type rise that you would hear during a ramp section that's like a build-up section that's preceding a drop. And so in EDM, when you have a ramp section, it's actually okay for things to be muddy. I mean, you obviously don't want to overdo it, but muddiness is actually good for the ramp section because it gives a little bit of contrast to when the drop hits. And so usually things you actually want to get things muddy. So for this rise, we're going to start lower, and we're not going to cut the bottom end. And that's basically going to be the biggest difference between this and the other rise, is just we're starting lower, and we're leaving in all the mud to help muddy up that bottom end a bit. So we got our new sound here in massive. It's basically going to look really similar. See what that sounds like. Of course, you can just turn this up in pitch, or you can play a little bit higher on your keyboard. And so generally this rise is actually going to be a lot longer than the trap rise, which is generally pretty short. So we're increasing the decay significantly. And it's optional whether you want to add in these other oscillators. In EDM, if you have a build-up, usually you have a lot of other elements. And so these other oscillators can kind of get in the way of everything else that's happening. But it really all depends on what you're going for, what your mix is sounding like. But really, one oscillator is just fine. We're going to add in, of course, stuff like reverb, just like we did on the other, just to give it more of a full feeling. Sounds. Of course, you can experiment automating whatever parameters you want. There's another way to do an EDM type rise, which I actually do pretty often. And so instead of routing the pitch, like I said before, what we can do is increase our pitch bend range, and then we can actually draw in our pitch bend. So if I draw in a part here and bring that up, I'm going to close this. So with an EDM ramp build-up section, a lot of times you'll have like syncopated snares or a kick or just some sort of instrument or sound playing a syncopated pattern. So it'll sound like boom, 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 etc., etc. It doesn't have to be that exact pattern, but I think you get the idea. And it sounds really sick if you can synchronize your rise with that pattern. And I found that the easiest way to do that is just to draw in the notes where that pattern actually hits. So if we have that pattern that I just kind of pantomimed or whatever, then it would look something like this. And if we play this, okay, so not too exciting right now, quite yet. But then if we actually draw in our pitch bends, and I believe this should be going up 2 octaves right now. And you can adjust this to be exactly what you want. It doesn't have to be specifically this. You can make it even more shallow. Sometimes that sounds even cooler. I'm still jealous of you FL Studio users with your smart automation. And you can even, like, for this section right here, then maybe have it go up even more, because it's getting a little bit more exciting maybe. And then you'll probably have like some sort of like big clap or snare or something right here, so you probably just want to cut that. But then if we go into our sounds, we can actually add some release to our volume envelope, and that makes it sound like this. And I would actually make this a monophonic sound, so you can go, if you're in massive, go to voicing. I would hit mono straight, just so you get rid of that overlap. And if we want this to sound even bigger, which we probably do, we can turn up the unison voices, maybe somewhere around 4. 4 should be just fine. And then increase the pitch cutoff and turn on the pan position. And you can mess around with that, of course. The chorus, you can add chorus. Basically, it kind of gives the same type of sound as the unison voice sounds. Of course, as always, you can add in the reverb and stuff. And then I would be sure to cut the volume right here just before the drop comes in. Of course, you might be building up longer than this, but right before the drop, make sure you cut everything out just so you have like that huge contrast sound. Without the contrast, then the drop doesn't sound very epic. And you can add stuff to this, maybe, I don't know, like a comb filter, whatever. In general, for all the sounds we've gone over, you can feel free to experiment with different wave types, different filters. You can use distortion. Just, use your creativity, play around. That's where the fun really comes in. This is basically just the foundation. If you're wanting something more subtle, you can turn down the intensity here in massive. You can even automate that. Essentially what the intensity knob right here is, it's not exactly, but it's basically a low pass filter. So if you're in another synth besides massive, you can just add a low pass filter, which is key tracked with your oscillator. Just if you're looking for something more subtle. Because with the rises and the falls, I wouldn't use them very often. I would just use them sparingly, I guess, just before big transitional parts. If you use them too often, then it kind of gets a little old. They're really powerful. It's a powerful sound, so you just want to be a little careful how you use them. Don't go completely overboard. But I guess that is a stylistic decision, and that's up to you. like I said, experiment. Use whatever you want to. Distortion, ring modulation. I like saying that a lot. But, you know, whatever. Use your creativity. One thing I did forget to mention for those of you who do use Massive is I'll be including some Massive patches for you guys just to have a little bit of a foundation to work off of. And then if you want to use those, you can tweak them around. Or, of course, you can always start from scratch. That's basically it for the video. Hope to see you guys next month. Peace.